I'm Diana Alvear, and welcome to Next 20. This is a series of conversations about racial, social, and the business issues that are going to be defining the next 20 years. These are the kinds of topics that we really need to dive deeply into and get a better sense because they are going to be defining so much of what's to come. So, of course, it's been 10 months since COVID-19 first came on the scene in the United States, and life as we know it changed, trying to make this work with our kids, trying to learn remotely, trying to social distance, wearing those masks. When George Floyd died and the whole racial justice movement and social justice movement started, I was very affected by that. I had a hard time working. We had a lot of very frank conversations at work about this sort of thing. But then, we also had to help our kids cope through this. It's been hard. Not only that, the mounting losses, people have experienced personal losses in their own lives and this feeling of uncertainty and turmoil and what's going to happen next. And sometimes it's easy to forget. You think, oh, they're kids. Maybe, they're not affected as much by all of these crises as we are. But let me read you some stats that may change your mind on this. So from April to October, the proportion of mental health visits to pediatric emergency departments jumped 24% for kids ages 5 to 11. 5 to 11. And then even more so, 31% for kids 12 to 17. And this is according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So that statistic stopped me in my tracks. And then another study in Italy and Spain released back in October found that 86% of parents reported changes in their children's emotions and behaviors during the pandemic. And these kinds of changes included difficulty concentrating, nervousness, uneasiness, and no-brainer, right? I mean, our kids have lost their stability. And so we felt it was really important here at Next 20 to have this conversation with you because so many of you are coping with these crises and then having to help your children cope with them as well. And we have invited two incredible experts on this topic to walk us through this and give us some real techniques and context in which to help your children have these kinds of conversations and get through this together. So it is my honor to introduce Dr. Rachel Busman. She is the Senior Director of Anxiety Disorders at the Child Mind Institute. And Dr. Shairi Turner. She is the Chief Transformation Officer at the Crisis Text Line. And that's been a really cool development, by the way, being able to text in times of crisis. It's just much easier, much less barriers in the way to people getting help. So I want to thank both of you for being here with me today. And I'm going to start with Dr. Busman. Thank you again. Tell me a little bit about what the Child Mind Institute does and how your work relates to our topic today.
As you said, I run the Anxiety Disorder Center at the Child Mind Institute. We are a national nonprofit that's headquartered in Manhattan, but we also have an office in San Mateo. But during this time, I think the idea of being borderless has really taken the front seat. We are an organization that provides direct clinical care for children and families across the age range for a variety, all learning disorders and mental health disorders. We also have a mission to provide accurate and evidence-based information about mental health. And so that we do that through our public education efforts. And we also have a really large presence in terms of doing research and also providing intervention and information really in schools, in underserved populations, and just in areas where kids might be at risk. So I am excited to be here and just talk more about mental health and also hopefully telehealth, which I think you alluded to with crisis text, like texting and just being able to immediately access help is so important.
So Dr. Turner, let's hear from you a little bit about what you do and why it matters so much at this time.
Thank you, Diana, for having me. I'm Dr. Shairi Turner, and I'm the Chief Transformation Officer at Crisis Text Line. And Crisis Text Line is the only national and international free crisis hotline that's run on a text platform. So we do not take calls. All of our crisis intervention services are performed via text. We are powered by volunteers who are supervised by mental health professionals. It's an incredible concept, and we, in addition to providing these services, We collect data, anonymous data, to help support the efforts, to help us to understand our texters. We are a data and tech company that supports this mental health organization. So in times like this, we accept anything as a crisis. We are here to help anyone who feels that they are in need of support. They can text in 24/7. It's free. We are a bit of a mental health emergency room for America, especially during these very, very confusing and complicated times.
Dr. Turner, I'm going to stick with you because I would love to know a little bit more about what are the most common types of outreach that you're getting related to the pandemic, to these crises? How does it start when it comes to texting during this crisis?
So people can text in at any time and they're received by a volunteer. They are assessed for their risk of suicide. They are then de-escalated. So there's an engagement via text to really help the person pinpoint and determine, adult or child, to pinpoint and determine what is the actual need, what is the crisis. So after every text conversation, both the texter and the volunteer can opt to complete a survey. So this helps us tremendously to understand what's going on across the country. What are the issues? So in 2020, what we saw that 36% of our conversations focused or included discussions of depression, 35% anxiety, 33% relationships, 26% around school, 23% around suicidal ideations, and then 28%, as you can imagine, 20% around focused on isolation and loneliness. So this is based on 1.4 million conversations that were engaged in between texters and volunteers in 2020. And for our purposes here, 48% of our texters are 17 and under. And 74% of them said in 2020 that they shared something with our volunteers that they had never shared with anyone else before. So we really see ourselves as a tremendous resource for teens and adults, but especially for teens who are such a text-based generation. It allows them the privacy and the access and the control to deal with their crisis independently, but receive the support that they need.
Dr. Busman, I want to turn to you about that. What are you seeing with the Child Mind Institute in your work with kids? What do they need from us?
Our most frequent calls from families, from parents concerned about their kids, and kids being 7, 8, 10, 20, include things like anxiety disorders, whether it be someone who had a pre-existing anxiety disorder and it's sort of percolated during this time, because we know when we're more vulnerable, when we're more vulnerable because of a stressor, that can make things that already exist worse. We're also getting new calls about new anxiety. And then again, school-related difficulties, just the difficulties navigating this really challenging environment. Isolation and depression, certainly for younger kids, but definitely our teens who are really feeling in a lot of ways very disconnected. For teens, your peer group is very, very important. And even though, some of the patients I work with know they have their friends, they chat with their friends via text frequently, and even maybe have a socially distanced walk, they still feel that lack of actual being with, right? I will also say that I've seen during this time incredible resilience. And that's important because parents, in some ways, that's the best way they can help, is to model certain behaviors and also remind their kids and teens that during this time, they've also been incredibly resilient, incredibly able to adapt. I think just the idea of mask wearing is a great example. I think many of us were probably thinking a year ago, my kid is going to wear a mask every day. That's like never going to happen, right? And they just do it, right? And I've seen also kids, I know families with kids who are, kids have sensory difficulties or on the autism spectrum. And yes, that adds an entire layer of challenge. And I've also seen kids and teens do amazing. It's important to work with families around how can we help? How can we arm you with some skills for you and your child? But also let's highlight your incredible strengths and kids' incredible ability to adapt.
There are so many families that are struggling with direct impact from a lot of what's been happening. I mean, just for example, maybe losing a family member or several family members to COVID-19. Right. Maybe their parents losing their jobs. Mm-hmm. And, when your parents are struggling for money, I mean, you feel it, it's scary. You don't know what's coming next. Parents that are struggling with, virtual learning and trying to make this work. And maybe they don't have access to internet, those kinds of things. Racial and social injustice, for young kids, feeling like this is an unsafe world and that they could be attacked or traumatized simply because of the color of their skin or because of the country they come from, or their parents, especially wondering if their parents are going to be okay. So when the parents are directly affected, when you are struggling to deal with this sort of thing, what can you do for yourself to take care of yourself and be that safe place for your kids?
It's recognizing the signs of when you yourself, when your cup is half full, you can't pour into anyone else, right? So for parents, things as simple as meditation and mindfulness and trying to stay present, right? Because for all of us, when it becomes a laundry list of concerns, it can feel so overwhelming. And what I suggest to parents is to really identify what is the top issue, what is the most concerning thing, what puts your family most at risk, and then what can you control, right? Because we try to sometimes control the uncontrollable, and that just increases anxiety. But if you can really focus on what is the issue for today, right? What can I do today that will help me or will help my family? What can I do? Can I focus on getting 15 minutes of exercise? Can I go out and walk? Can I make sure that I get a little bit of extra sleep? These are all things that build into our own sense of resilience so that we can support our children. So how we eat, what we eat, drinking water, even a bit of exercise improves our mood, sleep, and then, identification of what is the issue for you for that day and who is your support system, right? And recognizing that having your own support system can be a network of friends, family, or crisis text line or other support services.
I want to remind our viewers that Verizon does have an EAP that you can take advantage of. That's what it's there for. If you are struggling, if you need a support system that doesn't necessarily exist currently in your life, the EAP is a lifeline. It is a resource that you can take advantage of. Every employee at Verizon has access to that. And Dr. Busman, I wanted to go to you because we did see something extraordinary over the summer when it came to the crises around race and social justice. And we saw our young people get to work. We've seen them get to work with the climate crisis, and then we saw a whole other side of them this summer marching and doing things. So I wanted to talk to you about how does becoming active, like what kind of impact does it have on our kids in terms of coping with a crisis?
Yeah. It's important to focus on what we can control, right? There's nothing worse than feeling out of control in any capacity, right? No one really likes to feel out of control, and to try to control the uncontrollable isn't fruitful, right? So I do think that in times of stress, whether it's stress or if we're talking about political or socio-political crisis, what we're talking about sometimes for kids, teens especially, and adults is taking some action, some safe and sort of tangible action can feel like you are contributing, can feel like you are doing something. So for some, it means I'm acknowledging, I see you, I hear you, I'm an ally. For others, it means like I'm angry and I want to do something, but I don't know what to do. And so doing something concrete means like I am helping, I am mobilizing my resources, but I'm not just spouting, on Facebook or something. So I think taking action can make people feel like they're making a difference, but I also think it helps with this sense of control. Like there's something I can do that may have some impact, and it's sort of directed towards something that's consistent with my own values. So I think it's really valuable for the person. I also think that when you as a teen or an adult, whoever's doing this, is modeling for your peers, sometimes for your parents, or just saying like, I'm angry or I'm confused or I'm scared and I'm taking action. And then other people pick up on that, and then it becomes a bit contagious. So I see it as being really, really powerful in just a lot of ways, and probably behind the scenes in ways we don't even know.
This is taking place a week after the events of January 6th. And to me, I was trying to put this in perspective ahead of our conversation, and it really felt a little bit like 9/11. It really felt like we were watching something unfold on TV that was beyond comprehension, but here it is happening live in front of us on the news. And I wanted to find out, then this is a question directed to both of you, but I'm going to start with Dr. Turner. Have you had an uptick in questions or outreach as a result of what happened last week?
We have seen about a 1% increase in conversations that are referencing Congress, mob, storming the Capitol, voting, Senate. So all the key words that you would expect during a time like this, we are seeing a bit of an uptick in that. So people are talking about it. It's affecting their mood, their experience, their concern. It is affecting whether they feel like they are in crisis, because they are coming to us to have conversations about this.
I think the answer is yes, we are. And I think it just always reminds me as a parent and as a psychologist that to keep the dialogue open with our kids, right? So we have all these things that we think, right? So I know I personally, as a human and as a mother and as a psychologist, reacted to the events because I'm a human, right? But then when I talk to my son, I want to be careful not to put my own experience or my own perceptions on his, right? Because what a child or a teen might be thinking about in terms of, let's say, Congress or democracy or mobs might be different than what I'm thinking. So if we say, hey, Diana, were you really worried about X? That's different than saying, hey, what do you know about what happened last night? Or tell me what you've been hearing about what happened at the Capitol. What's on your mind? Then that leaves it open for the child or the teen to say what they're thinking about. And they might say exactly what you thought. And you were like, all right, good, I'm attuned to my kid. Or you might say, oh, that's so interesting. I wasn't thinking about, and I can't think of something in particular, but again, when we talked about going back to school or seeing friends or being disconnected, sometimes kids and teens, what's on their mind is a little bit different than what we anticipated. So it's so important to start the conversation with what's on your mind? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? And then that can guide you towards, I'm so glad you mentioned that. That's really important. Let's talk about that. And then you always want to listen for misinformation, right? Because again, the media and the news gives us information, but in a certain way. And kids and teens tend to fill in gaps when they don't have it with knowledge as best they can. So then we want to listen for, interesting, you said X. Let me just tweak that a little bit. That's not exactly what I understand. Let's talk about that. Does that make sense for you? And again, it's a dialogue. And then again, like many conversations with our kids, sometimes they have a window of opportunity. They don't want to have a 2-hour conversation. You say, all right, anything else you want to tell me about that? Anything else you want to know? Well, you know what? I bet this isn't the last time we're going to talk about it, but just know if you ever want to talk, I'm here. And it leaves it as, this isn't something I'm afraid to talk to you about. If you have a question, I'm going to answer it. And if you ask me something I don't know the answer to, I'm going to say, that's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that, but let's find out, or I'll get back to you.
Those were just excellent points, Dr. Busman. The meeting kids where they are, right? Don't have expectations of who they are, meet them where they are. And then what's different, I think, for us, so as a pediatrician, with my teenagers, it's different than when I was growing up, where our parents were very much the source of information. There is so much information sourcing out there for our kids that what we have to focus our role on interpreting that information and sourcing out the misinformation. And the only way that you can do that is through a dialogue, like Dr. Busman mentioned, an open dialogue where you stop, you don't pretend to know it all, and you let your child know when you don't know something, or when you're afraid, right? So to show fear and vulnerability can be very empowering to children, because they know that these are very human emotions and relevant to the times.
A lot of parents might think, show fear, show anxiety. Are you sure? Is this not going to make them more scared? So can we dive a little deeper into what you just said there?
So parents feel like, I must be strong, I must be tough, I must be, infallible. And in fact, what that does is detach, or it can detach children and teens from their own emotions, right? So if they look to the parent and they say, all right, throughout all this, my parent has remained neutral or has not been impacted or affected, that is the emotion that I am supposed to express during these times, right? So then that becomes discordant when they are actually feeling scared, anxious, lonely, right? So it's important to have a balance as parents, right? Because it can create anxiety for children and teens if they see their parents completely break down and not able to recuperate, right? Not able to build back up and talk through those emotions. Showing emotions that are really relevant to the times that's not something parents should shy away from, because it actually brings a dialogue together with their child, with their teens, about, this is how it makes me feel. How does it make you feel, right? Yeah. And then you've opened the opportunity to really hear about, I'm afraid, I'm anxious, I'm scared, right? Yeah. Because it's an acceptable emotion to have.
So let's talk a little bit briefly about, what if parents start seeing troubling signs in their kids? What if they start to see them becoming more withdrawn, more anxious, concerned over things that they don't need to be concerned about? If you start seeing some of these signs, what should they do? And I'm going to start with you, Dr. Busman.
Sure. I think it's such a great question. It's one that comes up a lot. First of all, you're an expert on your kid. So you have to know what their baseline is, right? And so that's where you start. There are lots of degrees of variation, right? So if it's very normal to see fluctuations in mood, irritability, withdrawal, just like one day being very social, one day wanting to spend time alone. Those are not causes for concern. What causes concern for me, and what I have parents pay attention to, are persisting changes, right? So key things for me are changes. Kids aren't going to say usually. Teens might, but kids, let's say in the 7 to 12 range, might not say, just so you know, I've been having some headaches and stomach aches, and I think that's actually a manifestation of my stress. That's not how it happens, right? We see complaints of like stomach, head, throat, sort of diffuse physical complaints, or increased irritability, right? Because depression or mood problems can show themselves as sadness, but often it's irritability, real crankiness, and then changes in sleep and appetite. So I think when those persist for, let's say, multiple days in a row, cause to raise your red flag. Weeks in a row, absolutely. And I think for teenagers, yes, they spend time in their room, but we want to know what they're doing. So if they're chatting with their friends or doing homework, I'm not so concerned. But if you see withdrawal and sort of a disengagement from activities that used to be enjoyable. Like, I just don't feel like, and I had a conversation with a teen that's struggling with depression just this week. So she cooks, but really isn't doing that so much anymore. Friends want to get together, but it's a lot, it's kind of exhausting. And I don't mean sleepy, but like blogging to do that, that's concerning. And that's where I think parents can know that real-time appointments are possible in some situations. A lot of us are providing telehealth, and that means there's help out there, even though what I think a lot of parents and kids are saying is, yeah, but everybody's stressed right now. So like, is it worth talking to someone about it? And my answer would be yes, the sooner the better, because we arm ourselves with some skills. We maybe draw from skills we already have. It's a little bit of an emotional tune-up, right? It could be short, but then we want people to be feeling better and not struggling so much. So I know that was a little long-winded, but I think aches, pains, mood changes. I think when you see your kid fluctuating from baseline, and I think especially for teenagers, withdrawal from activities they previously enjoyed, those are red flags for me. And I'm sure Dr. Turner, is hearing things that are more crisis, but certainly like suicidal thoughts, wishing that everything ended, or really feeling, really like more of those crisis points.
I think it's an opportunity, Diana, for us to normalize mental health, brain health, physical health as a continuum, right? So insofar as if you get a cut, if you cut yourself, right, and it's deep enough, you think, all right, let me go get stitches, or something starts to be infected. Let me go get treatment for it, right? It doesn't have to become extreme for us to seek care for our physical health. If we can look at and we can normalize for our kids and ourselves the same thing around mental health, where you don't have to be actively suicidal to say, maybe I need mental health. You can be, in the way that Dr. Busman mentioned, any of those things, right? Increased sleep, increased irritability. Those are all just opportunities for you to say, am I doing okay? Right? And if I'm not doing okay, pandemic aside, if you are not yourself, get help, right? The help is there. The telemental health now makes it potentially even more accessible. You have crisis text line. There are all these resources available virtually, that people, adults, kids should tap into, so that things don't go to the end point. Like, let's get it early.
I can't thank you both enough for just being so open and honest and really giving us workable strategies. And I think at the end of the day, it really starts to feel like it comes down to love and empathy, love for your children, love for yourself, empathy for the world at large,
Yeah.
and creating that space, that safe space for these conversations. And again, those guidelines for the conversation, knowing that we have those resources, that we have the crisis text line, that we have a place like the Child Mind Institute, and we have people like you who are dedicated to really helping our kids and people in general work their way through these kinds of crises. I never in a million years thought I'd see a year like 2020, and 2021 has not been much better just yet. So I thank you both for taking the time to talk to us. And again, if you're watching this and you work at Verizon, you have that EAP. If you are struggling right now, there is no need for you to struggle alone. You have a phone, you can pick it up and call somebody, and there will be somebody on the other line ready to help you talk things through. If your child needs to talk to somebody, the crisis text line is perfect for them. But yeah, it's going to take all of us together to get through all of this. And again, Dr. Busman, Dr. Turner, your work is so important. We thank you, and we thank everybody watching right now. This is why we do Next 20. This is why we have these conversations, and we talk about the tough stuff, because we need to talk about it so that we can, come together and make a better world, and not only for ourselves, but especially for our kids who, after everything they've been through, they deserve it. So Dr. Turner, Dr. Busman, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Another episode of Next 20. We thank you for watching, and we have another great conversation for you coming soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.